The biggest misconception of the movement is that it was a movement led by charismatic leaders engaging in direct action in public spaces. Thus, the March on Washington and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, the Selma to Montgomery March of 1965, the Birmingham, Alabama protests, or the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott. I mean, that's, if you say civil rights to people, I think that the average person, I think that's their sense of it. What's missed is that the real tradition of the civil rights movement has to do with community organizing. And I think it breaks down into three categories, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. One is that part of what defines community organizing has to do with people who are usually spoken for by others, finding their own voices and beginning to speak for themselves in ways that could not be ignored. Secondly, you see, again, looking at community organizing, kind of a convergence between young people and older people who had been out there engaged in struggle for social change, willing to work with young people and to share networks that they had established over years of struggle. And lastly, as important as the struggles against segregation and white supremacy were, equally as important, if not more important, to understanding the movement, you have to understand the challenges that black people made to one another within the black community. If you want to get to how Martin Luther King emerges as a leader in Montgomery, as important as the decision was to boycott the buses in Montgomery, you have to look at what challenged Martin Luther King within that community. And to make a very long story short, what challenged Martin Luther King was at a meeting after they had the boycott, which was supposed to be a one-day boycott, and they were having a meeting discussing whether or not to continue the boycott at his church until they ended segregation on the buses. And almost all of the ministers in that meeting didn't want to do it. They're nervous, scared. They came up with one excuse after the other as to why you couldn't extend this boycott. How it'd be better just to send a negotiating team down there. And the real leader of Montgomery, E.D. Nixon, a Pullman porter, stands up and accuses the ministers of cowardice. And he says, this is the way a story came to me from a woman named Johnny Carr, who no longer is alive. He stands up and says, "You preachers been eating these women's fried chicken long enough. Now it's time to get up off your ass and do something for them." And he continues to accuse them of cowardice. That's when a very young Martin Luther King, 26 years old, stands up and says, "I am not a coward." And at that meeting, and the ministers are so embarrassed, at that meeting they actually form a community organization, the Montgomery Improvement Association, and Martin Luther King is elected head of that organization. So how do we understand this? What was the challenge? Where is that challenge? It's taking place inside the black community, inside Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, Martin Luther King's church. If you want to understand the movement, you have to understand that.